The Uncontrollables. Outrageous? Sometimes. Thoughtful? Maybe. Offensive? Probably. Fabulous? Always. All right, we've got the third episode of The Uncontrollables. But tonight I'm joined by my, I guess, now official co-host, Josh Featherstone.
Good evening. Follow me on Twitter, J.A. Featherstone. I am Josh Featherstone. I am the Vice Chair of the Libertarian Party of Marion County, and happy to be here as always.
And then we've also got Jack in the Box, who is one of our guests tonight.
Jack the Lad, respectively. But hello, everybody.
He's a dirty little Anon Occupy degradate. And we've got another one of those guys named Sharks, kind of like an actual shark, but with an X, because it's cooler that way.
Hello, Indiana.
Indiana, and because we're not just in Indiana, I got good friends all over the world.
Okay, Indiana and world.
Yeah, because Indiana comes first, because we're awesome. And then we've also got a fan, a brother of Sharks, who shall not be named, who may jump in or may not, depends if we piss him off or he decides he has something important to say, which I doubt, because none of this is going to be important. You're just going to listen because I'm awesome. And Josh is off. I guess it's the co-host, so you need to be tied to this a little bit better.
I'm rather awesome, too.
I mean, you are wearing Ray-Bans.
I do have Ray-Bans on. Yes, this is correct, but they are not
uppity prick.
I'm yes. Hi, I'm Josh, and I am an uppity prick.
Yes, you are. So, what we're covering tonight is we're going to talk about Anonymous, the movement, the group, the individuals, the whatever the heck Anonymous actually is. We're also going to try to talk about Occupy a little bit and what the Occupy movement is and how it's relevant to Indiana and how's it going in Indiana with the Occupy camp out group. But before we get all of that, I do want to do a shout out to a Kickstarter project I have donated to, and I hope everybody else donates too. This is kind of a crossover from my other show and website, but it's the on Kickstarter, it's the Social Justice Advocate's Handbook, A Guide to Gender. It's by Sam Killerman. Yeah, Killerman. Not necessarily the best name for this what content he's trying to push, but he's the creator and content writer for It's Pronounced Metrosexual. And it's a great little website, and it has a lot of good issues, and it really brings the whole talk and discussion of gender and sexuality and gender identity and transgender and blah, 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 to a kind of a level-headed playing field and discussion where it's not super activist, in-your-face crap, and it's not really, it's not passive either. So it's a really neat website, and I'm really looking forward to this book. It's kind of going to be a handbook. It's going to go, if you're in the trans community or an ally or just part of the LGBTQ community, you can basically use this as a handbook when it comes to dealing with gender. So, yeah, go check him out on Kickstarter. Donate it. Give him lots and lots of money. Maybe give me money so I can give him money so I get more cool stuff from the Kickstarter. So, we'll go with the first question is, what is Anonymous? Special people that I've brought on today wants to answer that question.
Anonymous is a loose-knit hacktivist collective, but don't take that the wrong way. Anonymous isn't necessarily all hackers.
Wait, what's a hacker?
What's a hacktivist?
That's a great question. A hacker is someone who takes advantage of computer vulnerabilities for personal gain and or just general screwery. But a hacktivist would be someone who uses hacking for activism.
Well, how's that even possible? What do you mean hacking for activism? What are you going to achieve by hacking something?
Well, there's several websites that have been defaced, DDoS attacks. There's various routes you can take to essentially be a hacktivist.
But to what ends? I mean, what happens? You see on Anon or you see on the news and everything else that they've shut down the Iranian website or you defaced the whatever government official's website. What exactly does that accomplish?
Well, it can completely disrupt the users of the site or get the point across just by, random visitors. It's basically a win for the public.
But doesn't the public pay for those websites and the upkeep and the security?
Well, a DDoS, a denial of service attack, basically is something where you shut down a website by hitting it so much. So yes, the public does pay for it, but A good example would be, and recently, Occupy London took over the British Parliament to reenact the V for Vendetta last scene where everybody, walks into Parliament. So instead of actually blowing up Parliament, Anonymous helped to take down the website to metaphorically blow up the Parliament. Mostly unsuccessfully, unfortunately, but at least, the attempt was made. So yes, in a way, the public is paying for this service, but it's a form of protest.
Which I guess could be said about any form of activism or protest, that hypothetically, as long as the ills of the government or organization is still continuing, it's going to cost people, but hopefully it brings attention to it. So, by shutting down a website, people go to it and they're like, oh my God, the website shut down, what happened? And it's Anon, and they're like, oh,
where do you
I
find
guess they don't like this.
the limits? Where's the line drawn between what hacktivism is legal and what hacktivism is illegal?
It all really comes down to context. If you were to try and take down these websites using certain means, for example, if you were to visit them using your web browser over and over and over again, that's not illegal. But if you were to use a program, what Anonymous usually uses is called the low-orbit ion cannon, which constantly visits a website over and over and over and over again so that it crashes, that's considered a form of terrorism. So it's basically doing the same thing, but by using the software, that is illegal.
If you're DDoSing a website, it's pretty much the same thing as going to the website in your browser and hitting the enter button 5,000 times to refresh the page every second.
Okay, so there's a couple things Anon does, but so they actually do get on the street, and they're not just on the internet, and it's not just I guess a lot of people say that Anon's just a bunch of trolls. Like every time, oh, good Lord, the public has taken that troll word and just bastardized it. It's now if you disagree with somebody on a thread or a forum, you are officially a troll. That's just ignorant. So people, stop using the word troll wrong. Words have meanings and feelings, and they'll cry.
Right, trolls are short little ugly sons of guns that live under bridges.
Have you not seen our guests?
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, tonight with us, trolls.
Yeah. So that's what Anon's. I guess it's a what's the saying? It's what, we are a legion. You guys know that saying by heart, right?
Yes.
Well, what is it?
We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
Okay, what does that mean?
Yeah, what?
Right?
Well, in essence, we are legion is a biblical reference saying that we are many. And as Hydra, for use a mythological example, if you cut off its head, and two grow back. So there's no way to really stop us. Expecting us is kind of a warning to say that if you are out there and you are doing corrupt or immoral things, especially to harm innocent people, the average everyday American or world citizen, we're going to come after you.
Why is what Anon's doing important to anybody? I mean, we kind of talked about what they do and why, but why are so many people into it? Are there actually that many people that are a part of Anon?
Yeah, and Anonymous is a worldwide collective, and you can't really call it an organization because it's an unorganized.
There's no hierarchy. There's
no
it's
completely decentralized.
Vice president of the Eastern chapter of Anon.
Yeah, it's completely decentralized, worldwide. We basically bring justice to those who are too weak to defend themselves or too weak to notice that they are being acted upon in a negative fashion.
How do you rally the troops? How do people decide on what to do?
Well, the decisions are made by Anonymous as a community. Basically, you post something, a story, whether it be a story, a picture, or just basically your own words telling people about a certain subject. And if it takes off, then it takes off. If it doesn't, then it just slowly dies.
Where are you? You say you post this. Where are you posting it? Like, how do people know where to be going and looking for the next target?
Well, it's become a tough issue. It used to be we could have open internet relay chats where we could discuss things, and we still do.
Wait. Oh, what?
It's basically a chat server where people can communicate, ideally anonymously. But speaking of arrests, after so many arrests have happened, we've kind of had to take things in a different direction. A good example would be the doxing of Westboro Baptist Church. which is where basically through Facebook and other social media, Anonymous disavowed Westboro Baptist Church, everything they stand for and everything they do. And as a collective, we decided to gather all the information we possibly could with their names, addresses, phone numbers, business references, anything we could possibly get on these people, and just completely utilize that in whatever way we saw fit personally. In essence, we communicate through whatever means we can these days.
So there's no one place where the people that are participating in anonymous activities go and they find themselves like this is the location to find all the anonymous stuff.
No, it's fairly sporadic throughout the internet in general. We do have, there's a lot of pages on Facebook. There are a lot of pages on Twitter. Basically, just find one that suits your means. I personally run an Anonymous Indiana page on Facebook, so find that, like it, follow us. A lot of good news outside the mainstream media. I'm
trying to, by the way, as we're talking about some of this stuff, I am, as I said earlier, J.A. Featherstone on Twitter. And Tweeter, woo! And some of the stuff that we're talking about, the Facebook page you just talked about, and some of the other definitions and pages that we're discussing, trying to get links up on my Twitter account as we're talking about them, so feel free to check that out.
So it doesn't sound like you can actually pinpoint anything about Anonymous. It doesn't sound like it's a cohesive group, except on certain topics. Like we saw a huge amount of Anon support for our Fourth Amendment rally we had here a couple years ago when they were basically saying a cop can kick down your door, come in, and stick a gun in your face, and you can't do anything about it. And then that was the story that dealt with a judge's decision, and when the cops are going, now people can just willy-nilly shoot cops on their front porch, and it brought up the Castle Doctrine and a lot of other stuff. I'm sure everybody heard about that. Well, Anon came out and supported that hugely.
I don't know if everyone heard about that. Judge Stephen David was very, very easily reelected to the Supreme Court of the state of Indiana.
Because so the outcome of the rally didn't go anywhere, but that's because the voting populace on an average basis is about as smart as an...
You know that there's never been a Supreme Court justice in the state of Indiana who has ever been voted off the bench. Every single one of them has been reelected every single time because no one knows. All they do is they don't know what these guys are doing, and so they just go in, they're like, yes, keep him.
That's kind of disgusting. So actually, Anon did a great thing for, say, like the Libertarian crowd is, well, and the Fourth Amendment supporting crowd and anybody that cares about privacy and the rights to your property. But they came out and they support us and they pushed for it. And I think they were integral in getting a larger number of people out to that rally, which was, it wasn't tiny.
Very good. You were at that rally, weren't you?
Uh-huh.
That was a good rally. There was a lot of people there. Matter of fact,
a very broad range of people, which was surprising.
And the number of people that were attending, it grew so fast that they had to, they had to scramble to get, some permits and security, which was very interesting because it was a legal requirement to have the police there to provide security for the event that was there about the law on the.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. Those police that day happened to be extremely, extrememly pleasant to deal with.
They were very cool.
Super nice.
Yep.
They just laid down. They basically spit out the rough basics of what the ground rules were.
Yep.
They treated us like adults, and they stayed far, far away. Now
they stood kind of at the edge of the perimeter and just had a good time.
They did stand up a little bit when there were some open carry protesters there. They made sure to keep them off the State House lawn because that's the law. And so they did that. But the Indiana militia showed up, and those guys are insane. So if any of you are listening, I disavow you people, and I'm a gun nut extremist. So just take that into context, what I just said. So they kind of stood up a little bit and were like, who are these people? So other than that, they were very pleasant that day. So look, I said something good about cops. You can't say I said they were all bad all the time.
No, but in New York City right now, there's some or not in New York necessarily, but in...
Yeah, it's Brooklyn, and they've been live streaming it, and they've been live streaming how much the cops have been beating the crap out of people.
Yeah, and you haven't saw any of it on WTHR, Wish TV, Fox 59. I haven't saw any of it anywhere.
No, and you probably won't, because it goes back to the point that Anon's a very loose-knit thing, and the mainstream media doesn't know how to deal with real journalism. So, even talking about the little bit we have so far, it's really hard to say what Anon is, and it's really hard to pinpoint what they stand for, what they're going for. And so the mainstream media, they've been painted in such a horrible, horrible light. Even Alex Jones has said they're like an FBI arm. They're an arm of the FBI or something. So even that nut job says they're
Wait a second. So
they're
you
bad.
guys are too extreme for Alex Jones?
Oh, yeah.
Well, Alex Jones is just a conspiracy theorist in
Oh,
general, so anything anybody
he's a joke.
says is going to be a conspiracy one way or another.
And if I can say one thing about that, what I would say is that the reason that the news media portrays us in such a bad light is because we're not a marketable group. Being a loosely knit collective of people who don't have a specific, age group or relative things that we all have to certainly believe in, we're not marketable to mass media. Therefore, they can say whatever they want about us because we're not the group that they're trying to sell something to.
That's a very good point, and that's a big point to make with about anything when it comes to anything that the mainstream news is going to try to cover or not cover, or they slander. A lot of times they do that with libertarians because, well, we're kind of all of our own little leaders, and we're a collective of individuals, so we don't have this big money machine like this freaking GOP, bunch of blood-sucking leeches. But so that's an interesting point to make with that is that you guys can be completely slandered. And it's sad because what do you guys? There's another operation you guys have started. It's what the against pedophiles, right?
Correct. Op pedo chat.
And what exactly is that?
Op pedo chat, in essence, is a collective of anonymous members trying to remove pedophilia from the internet as best as we possibly can.
Real quick, I just want to, once again, I know we're talking about Anonymous. We've already talked about some of your tactics, but when you say that you're removing pedophilia from the internet the best you can, first off, where are you finding it and what kind of tactics are you talking about?
That's a really great question. For example, if you were to take the Amanda Todd case into consideration, you have to look at the harm that's being done to people. For example, Amanda Todd, a teenager who drank bleach because, in essence, videos of her naked were posted on the internet.
How old was she?
12.
12 years old.
12 years old.
So she was a young person in this day and age. Sadly it's gone crazy. But so she made a mistake, and she posted these videos online, and they went kind of viral in some of the more shady networks, right?
Extremely, extremely viral. And the government as a whole did not care to try and research or find the person that had brought these videos to light and had blackmailed her into suicide. But Anonymous, as a collective, was able to do so, which shows that we actually have the power to make social change without a need for law or government.
That's a pretty crazy point about the government that, that they've, in their words, you would think make one heck of a stand against pedophilia, but they didn't even bother to try to find out who was out posting pictures of her to a point. Let's talk about a 12-year-old girl, and this happened. It went viral. I mean, she killed herself over this, and the government didn't seek out the person that was out there posting this stuff.
No, as a matter of fact, last year the FBI lowered the budget for finding pedophilia on the internet.
Because in the end, we're not trying to make money off of anything, and the government is. In my personal, as a representative, as a person speaking for it, I would say that it comes down to if it's not something that can generate revenue for a police force or a government agency, they're not going to seek it out. Whereas us, as united citizens, can.
That's crazy though that you have taken down more sites than the government ever has, and yet and that's an important thing that you're doing, and it is a powerful thing that you've done already, and the media still doesn't find anything positive about Anonymous at all.
And no, as a matter of fact, it's because they can't market to us. We're completely decentralized. You can, but you can't necessarily pinpoint who's responsible for what.
There's a lot of other things that we could talk about that Anonymous has done that's been good. I mean, I find this as good is that they completely brought transparency to its fullest extent to the Church of Scientology. and brought to light a lot of things about that. And that's a good thing for a lot of people. It's a good thing for the public to know about that in the first place because of where it was going. And it completely changed the entire structure of Scientology and everything else. It was a really big thing. So you guys are basically doing a thankless job. You're out here, I see all the time on Facebook and on Twitter where they're taking down all kinds of pedophilia sites or pages on Facebook and everything else where Facebook can't even do that. So good job them. But you guys aren't getting paid. This is in your spare time. Now,
right, you guys are doing something just because it's the right thing to do.
Correct.
I mean, there's a lot of kick ass just in that statement. You guys aren't doing anything for any applause. You're not doing it to get on the news. You're just taking down pedophile sites because they should be taken down. You're just doing the right thing.
Yeah, some people do it for the lulz, and in case you aren't familiar with that, it's a perversion of the word LOL, which means laugh out loud. And for the lul, and when you do something for the lulz, you're basically doing it for fun. A lot of us that are involved with Anonymous find being on the internet fun. Social networking is fun. We can have fun doing a lot of things. You'd be surprised.
And I would add to that, too. It's something where we're trying to create society, change in society. And that's the same thing in the Occupy movement is really trying to do. I would like to have my children, for example, grow up in a world where they could wear an anonymous mask as a 10-year-old and be proud of that. So there is some pride to it, but in essence, it really does come down to just trying to do the right thing.
An anonymous mask. I know what you're talking about, but
The Guy Fawkes
there
mask.
we go, Guy Fawkes.
More correctly.
so the one from V for Vendetta.
Correct.
I guess we'll hit this point a little bit later about the connection between Anon and Occupy. That can be a big thing. But you talked about the lulz and the funny stuff. I mean, just some of the very offensive, very out there, no way in any way, shape, and or form PC humor. Now, I enjoy the ever-living crap out of that stuff because I'm an offensive person. I love offensive humor. I really honestly don't take offense to anything ever against me, and I have a lot of reasons to be offended. But you talk about change society. What I really like to see is that Anonymous goes out there and they make this humor. It's in the offensive crap. In being offended, you do not have the right not to be offended. That's just that's an absurd notion. But that you have the right not to be offended is absurd. So they do all this, and a lot of people get hurt by it. A lot of it's offensive and harmful, but you guys have never gone to the point where you've shamed someone into committing suicide. Like there was someone actually got famous because of being messed around with by Anon. If you want to know what the internet subculture of 4chan and Anon does, just go to YouTube and look up Boxy, Boxxy, and just watch everything. Watch the one that starts with FOAR in the title. Just watch it. And she basically was talking crap and then got attacked, and it turned into this huge thing, and it's wonderfully awesome, and she got famous and has YouTube ads, and she's making money off of it. I'm really jealous.
I would say, too, that, no, we haven't guilted anybody into suicide, but if the information that we provide to the public, which is true information about these people, does in fact drive them to suicide, then in essence they really, we're not doing anything they don't deserve. We're not doing anything but putting out the truth out there.
Wait, hold on. Don't deserve? Who are you to decide what they deserve or don't deserve? I mean, where does your standard of morals come from? Or do you not necessarily need one?
We don't need one. I'm not a judge and jury here. All I'm trying to do is put out information that shows the links that these people have to what I would personally consider corrupt and immoral things in our society. For example, the banking industry. And a lot of people's ties to these huge corporations that are enslaving us. Again, in my opinion, all I'm doing is putting that information out there.
Oh, no, it's not an
People
opinion.
People can do what they want with it.
It's not an opinion that they're enslaving us. They are enslaving us.
Has any of this ever backfired on you, or are you aware of any stories of any backfiring on Anonymous where some action has been taken, and then after it was done, all of a sudden a couple months later, you're like, oops, they actually weren't what we thought we were. We just kind of, we did something bad.
Not necessarily since I've been involved. I haven't really saw anything that I would take back.
What about are there things that other anonymous people do that piss you off?
Yeah, there's some drama that goes on within Anonymous, but let's keep that within Anonymous.
Sure, that's respectable.
So, have you ever known anybody, or, well, I mean, we're going to bring up cops for a moment. What kind of backlash has there been against certain members of Anonymous?
That's a very great question. This year and last year have been very, very, very rough for us. 2 cases I'll bring to light just as examples would be Jeremy Hammond and Aaron Schwartz. Jeremy Hammond is an activist who, what I would say, digitally Robin Hooded, stole from the rich and used that money to give to the poor or to causes that he thought were going to help the poor more than the rich would. Is now facing multiple years in prison. We're looking like 50 years in prison right now. It's still not, it hasn't gone to trial yet, but we're looking at that. And then Aaron Schwartz, who basically just put information out there that he didn't have access to, wasn't really committing that huge of a crime, a non-violent crime, is looking at $1 million in fines, 50 years in prison, because of these completely distorted laws where they can charge him over and over and over for offenses, kills himself in basically depression of realizing he's going to spend the better part of his life in jail.
And that was one of the founders of Reddit, correct?
Correct.
So
Correct.
The founders of one of the most popular and used websites ever committed suicide from pressure from the so-called justice system, right?
Correct. And I mean, really, if you look at that, that's what we're facing. The definition of terrorism has become turned against us and wielded against us.
Well, the government is a terrorist organization, but we'll hit that sometime later. But that's a fact. So there's a risk to being a hacktivist with Anonymous then.
Correct. But it all really comes down to context and what you're doing. I mean, understanding that if you commit a crime, you could go to prison, yes. But the definition of crime has become so distorted that anyone who's really taking on someone with enough money and power and influence in our society can become a criminal when they really shouldn't be considered to do so. I mean, for example, if you were to look at your average armed robber, someone who went into a store with a loaded gun and took money from a cash register, threatening to kill people, 25 years in prison.
That's something we talk
Tops.
about, as a libertarian, as part of the Libertarian Party, what our platform deals with just that, is why in the world are the people that are committing nonviolent crimes going to prison, A, at all, and B, if no one is ever really harmed in this.
Well, the victimless, not just nonviolent,
not just
victimless.
Victimless crimes. Why are these people going to prison for, in many cases, years and years longer than people that, like you said, you're talking about sometimes murderers and rapists out on parole before somebody that does something like what you guys are talking about with Anonymous is going to die in jail.
Oh, we expose the cover-ups. That's all there is to it. We expose the cover-ups. If something's being covered up, we will.
So you guys are also partially whistleblowers.
Correct.
So is there a big tie between like the WikiLeaks and the Free Bradley Manning movement with the Anon?
Absolutely. That has been a huge influence in what we do and a part of what we do. And it's come to a point where another thing that you could Google and reference is called Project Tyler. And Project Tyler basically is, in essence, what WikiLeaks was trying to do, but uncontrolled. It gives us the ability to take these documents and all of these things that we've gathered, share them openly, with less fear of prosecution or less fear of at least the website being closed down and us losing that valuable information.
So more decentralized than WikiLeaks.
Correct. And it's right now it's still in its beginning stages. People are terrified with all these arrests to even touch said software. But with time, I like to believe that we could live in a world where you or I could easily, if we wanted to know what our justice system was really up to, we could freely access that information.
So it goes back to it's a giant decentralized organization. It seems to have a little bit of a cohesiveness to it. Like it's one big wave in an ocean. So where does it stand politically? We just mentioned politics. Where does it stand politically? Is it leftist, right? Or can you not really apply left and right to? Well, that's a false paradigm, anyways. Or say like on the Nolan chart, where does it sit on the diamond?
Well, we're left, right, up, down, all at the same time. We don't take the side of any particular political party.
Except maybe anti-authority?
And definitely anti-authority and mostly anarchism.
Well, okay. That makes a lot of sense because I'm a voluntarist, and my understanding of voluntarism and the non-aggression principle is that retribution isn't really okay. Basically, how you punish people in a voluntary society, on my belief, because not everything's set in stone with a lot of these beliefs or philosophies. They're not technically truly time-tested, so I'm not going to say anything for fact, but the way I see it is you don't have retribution. If someone steals from you and they're not still there committing the crime or on your property, you can ask them to return your property and basically not aggress again, make another aggression, basically. And not pacifism now. Like, if someone's in my house stealing something, I'm going to blow them into 1,000 little tiny pieces and feed them to the animals outside. But if they're already off my property and gone, I can't really do a whole lot except maybe ask. But what you do is you publicly shame them. You ostracize them from your society for being a degradate or something below what your society needs. Now, this isn't like talking about communities that like to push gays out of their community or anything else, because that's a little bit beyond what's okay and what's not to people in a voluntary society. But I see Anon as being kind of like that, where it's, if it's needed, if there's a need and demand for it, it happens. So there's a desire to rid the internet of pedophiles. Everybody gets together and does it. There might be a movement to remove blonde-headed emo chicks that weigh over 85 pounds. Probably not going to get a lot of traction. It dies off. Nothing happens. It's not supported. It's not banned. It's not voted on. It just doesn't happen. It's
supply and demand in its purest form.
Yeah, and I guess the way you guys do things with some of the different attacks and the actions you guys take is ostracization, where you basically just say, get out of our community, get off the internet, go away, we don't want you here.
Well, the internet's always going to be open source and free domain. There's no way we can possibly destroy everything or anything.
Yeah, the government's trying.
They're trying real hard.
They're trying like hell. But in essence, really it just comes down to like-minded individuals gathering together and working together to do things that aren't getting done, that should be getting done.
And the government hasn't ever dealt with anybody like us, so they don't know how to deal with us. As far as they're concerned, we're a bunch of criminals. They're going to want to throw us all behind lock and key. I personally have a job, an apartment, everything. I'm a normal human being when you see me on the streets.
Wait, you don't live in your mother's basement?
No, but I did for years.
What do any of you live in your mother's basement? Show of hands. Not a single mother's basement.
My mother can't afford a basement. I had to live on the couch for a while.
Well, and I think it's kind of an unfair thing to talk about the internet crowd, this young crowd, and the 20-somethings, the 30-somethings that are living home with their parents, or they're sitting in their mother's basement in their underwear. That's not really a fair thing, because that goes into a million different issues of inflation, a lack of jobs. You've got all these kids being forced to go to college or peer pressured into going to college by their parents or everybody else to incur huge amounts of debt. How are you supposed to afford a house when you can't get a decent paying job to your degree? After you get out of college, you have high amounts of debt, no credit to speak of because you hadn't had a real job and you hadn't actually done anything because you've been at college. Where the heck are you supposed to go? I think it's a fault of parents, and I don't have a problem with kids moving back home and sucking off their parents, property in their house again, because I think it's the parents' fault the kids went to school in the first place and incurred all the debt. But that's a whole nother rant that we can get into later. By the way, I need to make one more statement before we kind of start moving on a little bit further, is I did mention Bradley Manning. We didn't really talk about that. I'm going to come out and say, and the show is going to endorse, that Bradley Manning is a hero. And he needs to be freed. He needs... Okay, I can understand he did make a contractual agreement with the military of the United States of America to, respect and abide by their laws, and he did break some of their rules and their laws, and he needs to pay for what he broke. He did. He committed crimes against the UCMJ and everything else, but he
was aware of the consequences.
Yes, but he is not a terrorist. He does not need to be prosecuted for sharing information, being a whistleblower. Now, I think his whole case should be thrown out for being locked in jail and, isolation, breaking all kinds of rules for over 1,000 days. Being treated like worse than the Chinese treated prisoners they picked up from Japan years and years ago.
In my opinion, he has already served his sentence. His sentence should be over. He should be released immediately.
And I would say, honestly, that the fact that you can view how the public is responding to the Bradley Manning case, how many people really want him freed or at least tried less harshly, and how our government is responding to it is a prime example of how the people, for example, the 99%, as I would refer to us, are really not listened to and have less control than we should in our society.
Good point. So, yeah, I'm going to throw that out there. I know a lot of people may not like that, but you know what? Coming from a veteran, I think Bradley Manning's a hero, and I would support him to the ends of the earth. You've got the idea of Occupy, and that's a whole mess. I mean, it started as one thing, and it's another thing where it's decentralized. There's a million different ways it's looked at and treated, and it's kind of like Anon in that same way. That's why they work together so well a lot of times, and that's why you see a lot of people now associate the Guy Fawkes mask with Occupy wrongly. That's Anon members and Occupy. So we're going to talk about Occupy a little bit and a little bit what it is, and I want to try to focus more on Indiana's Occupy movement, which, as I understand a little bit, I'm into it, is that it's fractured, it's big, it's huge, it's small, it's here, it's dead. There's a lot of ways this can go. So Occupy, it's kind of a brother organization, brother sister organization, or sorry, those are gender based. A sibling organization to Anonymous, to a degree. They work close together. A lot of them. It's a lot of crossover, things like that. How I personally see Occupy is because it's very big. You can't really broadly stroke the whole organization saying it's this or that. I see it as mainly as a network of activists, street activists more so than maybe social activists with, say, like Anonymous is, and what we've discussed on it. So it's a lot more street stuff, a little bit more of a long-haul activism thing with the encampments and, kind of big projects that are very risky and a lot more in your face in the public where you see them on your way to work. You see them when you go get lunch at work or anything else. And it's neat, and I think they've really changed the landscape of politics for the better or worse. I think for the better in at least this country. And it's a very interesting thing to watch and see and interact with, say, locally, where Indiana is very special. We're very spread out here, and it's very hard to get people into one place just because we are very spread out. We've got a lot of pockets, and this isn't like New York where there's 8 million something odd people in this tiny little pocket. We've got what, about 2.5 million people in Indianapolis?
Oh, no, we're not even close. Not even close. I think the city of Indianapolis itself is like 850 or 900,000, and if you count the suburbs, donut counties, you get to a million, 1.1 million, 1.2 million, something like that.
Yeah, so there's not a lot of people. And like we talk about the donut counties, is say you're from Greenfield, and that's the biggest town in Hancock County. It's about 38,000 population, so it's not big at all. But that's, to get downtown to meet up with other activists, you're looking at a 45, 50-minute drive. And that's kind of a lot. This isn't like a lot of other places. You got like Oakland, California. So things like that kind of need to be applied to the conversation when you're talking about Occupy. But I've dealt with you guys a little bit here on a couple things, a couple little outings, and I've watched you guys pretty close, and it's a very diverse group, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. One of the main things that really I enjoy about the Occupy group is that it's a lot of different variety of people coming from different backgrounds and beliefs who are really aiming for the same thing. I mean, there's a lot of different things that we support, but when you break it down to try and explain what the Occupy movement is going after, it's the banking system. It's the banking system that controls our society that forecloses on people who can't afford their homes, who really shouldn't have been given these crazy interest rate, ludicrous home loans in the first place. Looking at college students who are buried in debt, and tons of people who are just getting controlled by the 1% of society that owns 50% of America's wealth. So we're all kind of aimed in the same direction now, whereas we were all defocused before.
Now, I want to make one stipulation here. Is the banking system and the 1% to 99% thing, there's some good points to be made there. But people aren't ever forced to take college loans or forced to sign that paperwork for their home mortgage. Now, people make bad decisions, but I honestly don't really have a problem with a bank that sells a service, basically, is a loan of money, that you agree to the terms. And I point it full at, one, the government for pushing and technically forcing banks to make these horrible, horrible loans and completely destroying the whole interest rate system and forcing banks into basically doing whatever they can to stay afloat. And, you know, they need a lot of money, but that's a whole nother corporate greed thing. But these people went out there and they made these bad, horrible decisions at the behest of the government and now the banks. And now they're stuck with this stuff, and they're being locked out of their homes. The banks are absolutely destroying everything. They're in cahoots with the government, and I don't really see a separation between banks and government. So I just want to put that out there, that there really isn't a separation between banks and government.
And also on the student loan aspect, I guess I would disagree just a little bit about that, because the student loans, the buried in debt, I think is more to blame on the universities than it is the banks. You know, the cost of the universities is what it is. They have to get the money somewhere to be able to afford to go. But, and once again, that's on the government. You know, the cost of universities is so high because of things like government student loans, insane idea that you absolutely positively have to go to college to be able to achieve anything in your life. You create this artificial demand. You pump everyone into college, and what happens when you put that much demand out there? You put the price up through the roof. But
well, and another thing that has recently come up and could be addressed here as timely relevant is the whole, they're going to stop giving the tuition benefits and everything to veterans now. They're starting to cut back on, you know, free college for service members and veterans. And I think that's an interesting point, that the government subsidized college education by giving the GI Bill and everything else. And they've been doing it for a really long time. And I know that's a touchy subject, but you go to serve your country, well, there's only so many freebies they can give out before it is an absolute subsidy of something.
at what point does it become bribing people to become members of the military?
Right. Well, very, very true. And it'll be interesting to see with them cutting back college benefits if the military applications drop, because I know a lot of people that joined strictly for those benefits. Now, I would also go as far as to say that colleges are an arm of the military-industrial complex at that point, because think how much money has been funneled. I mean, you talk about Lockheed Martin and Boeing and the evil things they do, and Northrop Grumman, and I probably said that wrong, I'm sorry, but the stupid name. And those people are basically entities of the government because they couldn't exist without the government in the first place on almost anything. So I really like the idea that Occupy is attacking the banks. But I saw like Adam Kokesh and Peter Schiff went out there and talked about kind of end the Fed and, you know, the 16th Amendment and the Federal Reserve Act. And those people wanted nothing to do with that. They actually were, a lot of the more popular Occupy moves were begging the government to get involved. I mean, what do you guys, as, you know, more locals here, what do you guys think about that? What have you seen that maybe is different from that message?
Well, I would start by saying that it really does all come down to personal responsibility. If I were to go out and take a loan for a home or for a business or for a car, yes, I'm the one signing the papers. But I will say that we live in a misbalanced society where I'm not really given the chance to succeed, to be able to pay off these debts in a reasonable time or manner, and that is a direct product of greed. That's a direct product of the greed from the wealthy, and that's the kind of society that we live in. What I would say as well is that really when it comes down to it, we're just trying to bring awareness. It's hard to, as well as Anonymous, for example, it's hard to gather a lot of different people from a lot of different cultures towards one same goal. But when you do things like you close down the stock market, when you have so many people gathered together that they can actually blockade the stock market and close it down, something that's very rarely been done in history, in American history, that shows that there are enough people out there who agree to, at least on some, they can put aside their own personal religious or political or societal beliefs for a second and say that this is wrong and that something has to be done to change it.
But I guess I take fault because I've made quite a bit of money off the stock market. I mean, I was one of those evil 1%ers and an investor and a day trader for a while. And you look at the market now, and it's a great opportunity to make money and invest money. And I don't see a lot of these people being intellectually honest with anything, or even finding like a base reason why all this has happened. They look at the surface and they just yell at it. Where I see like things like Anonymous, they're going to the source of problems and they're dealing with problems. They're actually solving things. They have solutions, and it's very point based. What Occupy is very broad, and it doesn't seem to ever actually address the source of the problem.
Well, if I could ask you, Maya, at what cost? At what cost are we really forcing our youth, our elderly, our veterans to have to go through these struggles? Who's really benefiting here? And that's the thing that's been the main focal point, is understanding that, yes, there's nothing wrong with trying to succeed in our society. That's something that built our society, and it's something we should almost be proud of. But at the same time, it's become completely twisted and warped to a point where we don't have a chance, And I almost got to, I have to ask it, at what cost are we benefiting off?
So
people?
where is that line in the sand? Where does it go? Because obviously successful businesses are important. We've got to have them. Where does the line get drawn that it goes from, a business is successful and is profitable and is doing the things in the best interest of the business, to where do they cross to, okay, now it's greedy and it's too much and we need to step in and take action?
When does it become the evil capitalist beast?
Yes.
Great question.
Evil
question.
corporatist beast.
There we go.
Evil corporatist beast. Okay. But either way, I would still say it really comes down to what you're providing to society versus what you're gaining from society. As someone who's worked at many different jobs trying to succeed and gain for myself and for my loved ones, I can say that I know that my hours and my time have always garnished a much larger revenue for the company I worked for than I was bringing home to myself, and that's unfair. I'm not saying that someone who has the ability to start a business and grow it shouldn't be able to do so. What I'm saying is there does become a point with lobbying and with all kinds of various forms where you just control people's lives, and it does become a credit-based system. Like, to use for example, in I would say the olden times, but really we're talking about 60, 70 years ago, people who worked for coal mines in Kentucky, who basically had to go to a company store. What you did was you would work and you would make enough money to be in debt to a company store to feed your family. So you never had a chance to ever actually be able to get out of the coal mines. That's something that is an example. Instead of growing as a people and a society to give us more opportunity, we're actually going backwards.
Now, and I fully understand it. And that's it's a horrible thing. Is that I've worked jobs where I've made $20 an hour, and I at one point thought that was like, hey, that's really good money. It's like I one year I brought in about $95,000 after taxes. I was like, wow, that's a lot of money. No, it's not. The value has been the value of the dollar has been devalued 98% since we took it off the gold standard. Just in 72.
Yeah, it's funny when you look at those the charts of what a dollar's worth today, versus what it was like.
At least on the graph, the point is 98%. So my almost $100,000 of revenue was absolutely nothing. And then you add on top of that, the cost of goods have been increased because of increased taxation, regulation. There's all kinds of things. So I see the problem where people say, I have this job and it pays horrible and the company treats me like crap. Well, stop working there. I got tired of working for people, and I took a huge hit in the income and my lifestyle and everything else because I was tired of working for other people. I mean, I got fired, so it wasn't exactly a choice, but I didn't really fight it, and I didn't actually really want to go look out for anything else. But I'd already been working on starting my own business, and I started my own business. Instead of blaming somebody else for my shortfalls, I can only blame myself at this point. So I did take complete individual responsibility, which I don't see that message really being pushed in Occupy. They say, the evil banks need to do something about this loan process, instead of saying you people need to stop getting these stupid loans. So it's hard. We're in a rough spot. But if you look at the source of every last issue that Occupy's ever talked about, the source of it is government. You talked about that coal mine. Well, if it wasn't for how the government deals with property rights and mining rights and regulations, everything else, you wouldn't have this super monopoly on coal and mineral rights. You just wouldn't. It wouldn't be okay, because you think of like the natural gas fields out in Wyoming and everything else. Nobody wants to buy that stuff because you can't even get a permit to tap the drill. If it wasn't the case, everyone would have their own little derrick out there, and they'd be getting oil and natural gas and coal on their own, or they'd come together and form a coalition and a company to do it. So the basic point is corporatism cannot exist without government intervention. It cannot. The government is the reason there's corporatism. So that's the huge problem I have with Occupy is, like I said, they don't go after the source. And so all these problems are sourced to the government, and I just don't see them addressing that.
On top of that, I'd like to add, I believe it would be very interesting if we could take a different direction and maybe see if we can solve problems by giving out more freedom.
Amen.
Oh, amen to that.
Right.
Well, it's like, okay, I'll make a comparison here. It's like with the wonderful movement Anonymous, which I fully endorse, is I think with the whole pedophile thing. Though if Occupy was dealing with that, what they do is they would attack Comcast and YouTube for giving those people too much bandwidth to be pedophiles. I think that's pretty much how that would work out with the way they've dealt with a lot of things lately.
All of these are very well said points. To be
well,
honest,
of course
though,
they are. I'm just that awesome.
Well, again, to use for an example, you're a very strong person, and you're capable of overcoming lots of things. But not everyone out there has that ability. I would reiterate the point we were discussing previously by saying that. Not everyone out there is as strong. When it comes down to it, really, as far as the Occupy movement, the things that we've done, like, okay, for example, just to toss this one out there, SOPA, trying to protect internet freedom. That's something that Anonymous, as a digital movement, was able to promote and get out there to lots of people. But if it was not for the Occupy movement, if it was not for people in the streets with signs, getting out there and doing something about it, that would have never been overturned. When it comes down to it, too, we're trying. And we're doing what we possibly can to get out there and speak the word to people in a physical presence. So, it's viewed in a lot of different ways, and that's because it represents a lot of different things.
So, basically, when we talk about the Occupy movement in Indiana, it's very fractured. It's fallen apart. Now they're naming it Occupy or Indie Occupy Rebirth.
Right.
There's a lot of it's fractured. There's a lot of different things. So, as people that are active, hypothetically us sitting here, should we more move to make it just an activism network, not a focused activism network, but just a network of activists where we can go and we can call on the different groups and different sects within it, go through Anonymous and have them work on this, and then Occupy be the ground force for that particular movement if they so choose, or me as someone that's very, very active in the Libertarian Party of Indiana, go to them to maybe support if there's a candidate supporting something that all the activists in the Occupy network support, can come out and campaign for the candidate or whatever in any kind of fashion. Is that more something we should try to do with it?
Well, I don't want to speak for Occupy Indianapolis.
I'm not saying speak for them, but what you think they
what I would
do.
say, speaking for the Occupy movement, as an example, in Louisville, Occupy Louisville, right? What we tried to do was gather together as a whole. We had a lot of problems with getting everybody together and focused. So, for example, setting up a tent city in support of Occupy Wall Street, which was a huge, pillar that all these cities kind of tried to model after. We went through the state. and we got permission through the state to protest as a group and camp out, and we were legally okay to do all that for about 6 months. And then after that, we had to go through and try and renegotiate with the city, to which they denied it at that point because it wasn't such a big issue. At first, they were just getting media attention off being so working with us. But after 6 months, they stopped to care about us. So what happened was smaller subsections, and I'll use the name, Black Cats, right, which is something that's known amongst Louisville as a smaller, more militant group that based off of Occupy Louisville went out there and actually did things. You're talking about a dozen people who get together and try and work together to get something done, like foreclosing a bank, where you were to actually take a chain, wrap it around the door handles of a bank, and put a lock on it, put a padlock on it, just like they do to tons of people's homes every day. We were showing them what they do to us. Now, that's something that Occupy Louisville and Occupy Wall Street couldn't publicly endorse. But as a smaller group, we were able to do. So I would say yes. I think that keeping it as a network where people can get together as activists of their own liking is a wonderful idea, and that would be a great rebirth.
So, yeah, and so instead of trying to define what the Occupy is, like, say, the Tea Party tries to define themselves as something, or there's all these other groups, you got like Reason, Cato, think tanks, 501c3s and 501c4s and everything else that try to define themselves under this thing, is just basically make it a physical anonymous, basically, of
Correct.
just basically, like I said, an activist network, and I think that would be a great place to try to take this.
Yeah, and nothing against Occupy or anything, because they get out there and they have the balls to do their thing, but something anonymous is way better at is pointing at key issues. If anonymous points at the key issues and maybe Occupy pick up on some of those things. Yeah, CISPA actually stands for the Cyber Intelligence Sharing and Protection Act. So it's more lashing out against copyright, but we all know that's broken.
Well, and like the DRM and digital rights management and everything else, and what CISPA does is it modifies and adds to the National Security Act of 1947. So when when people want to blame things on Obama or Bush or current politicians, remember the groundwork for all the bad, nasty crap they've been doing has been laid for decades. This is modifying something from 1947. Always, let's just kind of put that into perspective there. But so
wait a second. You mean that our government is going to take some archaic and mostly obsolete law and somehow twist it to use it against us today? The hell you say?
Yes, because our entire system of government is flawed from the get-go, and I know that's going to irk some people, and they're like, the Constitution and blah, blah, blah. No,
There's your Julie Borowski again.
Oh, I'm going to just stab you. Violence is wrong. I'm going to stab you anyways. Is that the Constitution is an absolutely horribly flawed document, and it has given us the government we have. So stop worshiping it. It's just a piece of hemp paper that a bunch of old people compromised to make because they gave in to the wrong people. So, yeah, with that, I think we're going to go ahead and end the show now because I'm sure it's really long, and we talked about a bunch of dirty, smelly hippies and such.
Got some other good stuff coming up on Indiana Talks.
Yeah, there's going to be all kinds of shows you guys need to listen to, mainly mine, but that's okay. You guys can listen to the Encore. It'll be on. It'll be archived. You can listen to it over and over and over again and share it everywhere. You can follow me on Twitter. It's Maya_Axton. Just find me on Facebook, Maya Axton, or just go to the Uncontrollables on Facebook, like that. Also like Indiana Talks.
Donate some money because old Gary Snyder
Running
put
the
this
network's
together.
not cheap.
Just there's that little donate button. It doesn't take a ton of money to make a heck of a lot of difference. So just throw a little bit out their way.
Also, go check out Anonymous Indiana, the Facebook page. Give that a like. They'll give you a lot of good news. They don't post just about hippie, I'm in my basement playing Warcraft stuff. They do share a lot of really good stuff. So give them a like. Find out some more.
Sharing, that's a good way you can make a heck of a difference out there yourself. Is you see something that's important like the stuff we're talking about, just give it a share and let other people see what's important to you.
Yeah, mainly share from like my pages or my personal page, and then like all of my stuff and comment because, well, I should be the source of everything. I'm just that awesome. I need more followers and fans. And with that, we're going to end episode 3. And if you like this, please give us some feedback. If you want to be a guest, give me a shout. Find me on any of the Facebook page or Twitters or anything we just shared. And give me some topics you might want to hear about, you might want to hear my opinion on. Or maybe you just really hate me and you want to tell me how much you hate me and how I'm wrong on everything. And thanks for listening.
Like the damn Pee Wee Herman show where they had like, there was like a secret word of the day, and every time somebody said it, everyone was like, "Wah!" Tonight's secret word is